Hello and welcome again to Bible Trek, where we are broadcasting from beautiful Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. And we have our lovely ladies here again. And we are in the book of Deuteronomy. For those of you who are at home and online and following along with us, we are having a great time. There was a question asked last week about Moses' wives. How many did he have? And then we also had a question about Esau. Esau, that is mentioned in Genesis 25. We wanted to know which Esau was that. Was this the right Esau? And so I believe I'm going to be able to answer that question, as well as I'm going to be able to tell you about Moses' wives. So let's do that first. Moses had 2 wives.
Okay.
2 wives. I thought he had a bunch. He had the first wife, Zipporah. And I think I told you all that when I preached my trial sermon or whatever I did, Zipporah and another lady, they were midwives.
Oh.
And they were mentioned because when Pharaoh was trying to get rid of the Israelites, he told them to kill those children.
Right.
The midwives, Zipporah and the other lady, sent back message, they're too fast for us. They're having these babies quicker than when we get there.
Yeah.
That was Zipporah.
Oh,
and she's mentioned by name because her Midianite priest father, who was Jethro, gave her to Moses as a wife. So Moses didn't choose her.
Yeah.
But he did choose the Cushite woman, or the Ethiopian, which was his second wife, who was not named. They didn't name her. But this is the one for which Miriam and Aaron got in trouble for mocking the marriage between Moses and this black woman, because that's what I explained to you, that even then, race did not matter. They were more concerned about your tribe.
Yeah.
That was more important. So, Moses had 2 wives.
Thank you.
One was Zipporah, and the other was an Ethiopian woman for whom there was no name given. Esau, it is the same Esau for whom he sold his birthright for what I call a bowl of soup.
Yes.
His brother was cooking, must have smelled mighty good, and his brother Esau offered to sell it to Joseph, and Joseph said, you're willing to sell your birthright? And Esau said, what good does it do me if I sit here and die of starvation?
Right.
I'm hungry.
Yeah.
And he sold it for a bowl of soup.
Wow.
So it was the very same Esau.
So he must have been pretty old. Right?
They lived to be very, very old.
Wow.
So yes, and I think I might be able to figure out about how old he was.
Wow.
But they were twins.
Yes.
Esau and Jacob were twins. And Esau came first, and he was red and hairy.
Yes.
That's where his name came from. And Jacob was a shepherd.
Yes.
Okay?
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. So, let us turn to Deuteronomy, because we're not done. Deuteronomy is not a very big book. It's only 34 chapters. And in Deuteronomy, we talked about, this is the 5th book of Moses. And we talked about Deuteronomy is the teachings of the covenant. This is the covenant where God said to Israel, if you follow my rules, I will increase your land, your fertility, and your prosperity. Now, when God promised you something, you can count on it. You can bank on it. And Israel didn't do that. Somewhere along the line, Israel got all twisted up. All kinds of things were going on. Number one, we already know Moses, who was his man, Moses married a woman who came from a tribe who believed in many gods.
Oh.
That was a terrible thing.
Right.
And Moses knew better. It's not like they were little kids.
Yeah.
And we talked about how come, punishment in antiquity was swift.
Yes.
You didn't have to worry about it. You crossed that line, that was your head.
You're out.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't think I could have lived in antiquity. Why do I say I don't think? I know.
Yeah.
I got a big mouth.
No,
I'm always asking
I'm
questions.
quiet now, but I speak out.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And in those days, women were seen but not heard.
Yeah.
And so we talked about how Miriam, who was Moses' sister, older sister, had taken him and put him in the bulrushes so that the Egyptian princess would find him. That was not happenstance.
Yeah.
God already looked way down the road and saw that happening.
Yeah.
So for her to come after going through the Red Sea,
Yeah.
after surviving the wilderness and eating manna and being fed by God, for her to mock him the way she did, he immediately struck her with leprosy. Immediately. Leprosy is a terrible skin disease, for those of you that don't know, and it's smelly, and so therefore you have to be put out of the camp. You can't be in the camp, and it's contagious. And so at first, God didn't say how long she was going to be out. He struck her with leprosy, and he was done. His judgment had been exacted. But Aaron and or Moses, I think I had to look it up, one of them beseeched God, please, don't do this. What will people say? And God said, well, had she spit in her father's face, she'd have been set out for 7 days. And so, he's the father.
Yes.
Let's set her out for 7 days. So the camp couldn't move until she was clear. You didn't move and leave people behind. Everybody traveled along together. There's safety in numbers. Yes. And even though God is leading these wayward, hard-headed people, there's still safety in numbers because some things require common sense. And a lot of times we just don't have common sense. We mess around and let things that we hear in our head or other voices that we hear in our head dictate our next move when we should only be listening to one voice. And we recognize that it's hard, and God knew it was hard. He already knew man's shortcomings and deceitful ways. He already knew that about man, and it grieved him. But he kept putting his faith in these guys. One of you fellas is going to do the right thing. One of you. And it turned out the one that did the right thing was Jesus. Nobody else could handle it. Nobody else could handle it. And so I always say, thank God for Jesus, because we wouldn't have made it.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so Deuteronomy is about the covenant, fidelity, and obedience. And I do believe that we went through the fact that in Deuteronomy 21, if I'm not mistaken, can we go there? Is that where we find, the Ten Commandments again? I think I had mentioned to you that if God says something more than once, if he says something twice, I'm sorry, it might be further back. The covenant made at Mount Horeb. It is, I'm sorry, Deuteronomy 5 and starting at 6. It is the 10 Commandments. Deuteronomy 5.
Okay, go.
Yeah. Deuteronomy 5. And it begins at 6. Why don't we just go through them? Because the 10 Commandments are your basic instructions for life.
Yes.
You can get along, and everything you need to know is in these 10 Commandments. So why don't we have you start us out, Teresa, and then we'll have Miss Lala take a couple. Because it's 10 of them. Why don't you do 3, Miss Lala do 3, and you'll do 3.
What
And
chapter
we
are
should
you
be done.
in?
We're in Deuteronomy 5.
5.
Yes, ma'am. And it should start right around verse 6. It's the 10
Oh,
Commandments.
I'm on 5.
Go to 6. 6 is going to be the very first one.
All right.
Your heading should say the 10 Commandments. Do you see
Yes.
it, Miss Lala? 5. And let's see, verse 6. Here it is. Honor your mother and your father. Here it is, right there, Miss Lala. Now, Teresa's gonna start it, and then you'll pick up when I tell you.
All right.
But it's right in here.
And
All
where
right,
do you
honey.
want me to stop at?
I want you to do the first 3.
3. Okay.
So you'll do verse 6, 7, and 8.
Okay. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image, any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is in the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth.
Amen.
You shall not bow down to them nor serve them, for I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, to the 3rd and 4th generations of those who hate me.
Amen. Hold it.
Okay.
Miss Lala's going to pick up at 10.
Okay.
Do you see it, Miss Lala?
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
But I lavish my love on those who love me and obey my commands, even for 1,000 generations. Do not misuse the name of the Lord your God. The Lord will not let you go unpunished
That's right.
if you misuse his name. Observe the Sabbath day by keeping it holy, as the Lord your God has commanded you. 6 days a week are set apart for your daily duties and regular work. But the 7th day is a day of rest, dedicated to the Lord your God. On that day, no one in your household may do any kind of work. This includes your sons and daughters, your male and female servants, your oxen and donkeys, and other livestock, and any foreigners living among you. All your male and female servants must rest as you do.
Right there. We're going to stop right there. Now, we have understood these are instructions. There's not nothing said that maybe you could, or perhaps you might. All of these are specific instructions. Thou shalt not. I am the Lord your God. Keep the Sabbath day. There isn't anything in here that's wishy-washy. Everything is a command. You can start at 15.
You shall remember that you are a slave in the land of Egypt, and the Lord your God brought you out of there by a mighty hand and by an unstretched arm. Therefore the Lord your God commanded you to obey the Sabbath day. Honor your father and mother as the Lord your God has commanded you, that your days may be prolonged and that it may go as well with you in the land which the Lord your God gives you. You shall not murder, you shall not commit adultery, you shall not steal, you shall not bear false witness against thy neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, and shall desire your neighbor's house. This field, and or his male servant or female servant, his ox or his donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor.
That's it. Anything that belongs to your neighbor. You know, again, when we read these, they're commandments. Don't do this. You shall not. You cannot. It was clear. There wasn't anything that you had to ask somebody. You think he meant...
Right.
No. Everything was clear. God is a jealous God. He says that. And so he wants you to be clear on what he likes and what he doesn't like.
Right.
And so technically, there's no excuse. You can't come back and say, God, I didn't really understand. You said don't kill, but I didn't really kill him. I poked him and then he died 2 years later. You started that.
Yeah.
It's clear. And if someone should be charged with murder, it will be you. Simple.
Yeah.
And I love it that he's that simple. You never have to worry about where you stand with God. Never. Man, you can never figure out what he wants. They always say it's women. I can't understand a woman. But you can understand men.
Right.
And it's sad because we were created in God's image. Therefore, we should be able to explain ourselves or express ourselves the way God did. And we can. We just choose to be catty. But that's not a good thing. So, I talked about the 10 Commandments because you'll know that the 10 Commandments were originally given in Exodus. And now here we come in Deuteronomy, and here they are again. I do not believe that they're in the Bible again, but you can best believe if God said it, he meant it. But if he said it twice, you can bank that that was very important. God didn't really repeat himself, but if it's in there 2 times, pay attention. Something to pay attention to. All right. So we're in Deuteronomy, and what we want to do is, because this is teachings about the covenant, I think we're going to run over to chapter number 23. Chapter number 23. In Deuteronomy, he's setting up and giving also the laws. Once again, I don't think I could live in antiquity, because not only are the laws clear, but there's laws on everything. Divorce, birth, giving birth, buying food, how you should treat your neighbor, how you should treat your husband, how you should treat your servants.
Yeah.
It's clear and it's in here. So this particular chapter got my attention because it gives you instructions on who may or may not enter the congregation. And remember, the congregation is this whole of the people who were brought out of Egypt safely. And it's not a little bit of people, it's a lot.
Yeah.
Which they call it a congregation because I believe we are talking upwards of beyond 10,000 folks.
I thought I heard 1 million.
Did you? And,
I
and
might
that's
be
another,
wrong,
but
but,
that's
you know,
another question to write down. How
heard,
many
Yeah, there was a lot.
escaped Egypt? Because remember, I told you, some of them lost their lives because this is a trek. They either got sick from illness, they might have fell over on a rock and flipped off on or gotten lost in a cave or whatever. Certain things happen, but when they started out, they were many, 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 many. And they continued to have more along the way. And we knew that because when Moses broke the covenant and God told him that he would not enter in, he also told him what age group would, and that's why they had wander for 40 years until they all
Died.
out. And again, we serve a merciful God, because the truth be told, he could have knocked all of that out and be done with them and went straight to the promise and moved forward.
Yeah.
But he's a merciful and a loving God. And those who lived during that time were able to live out their lives and pass on, knowing that they would not see the promised land. Of course, he took our very agile Moses up on the mountain and showed him the promised land, but he said, you won't be going in. And then when Moses died, he was buried by God. Nobody knew where. God buried him, and it was unmarked, and nobody knew from that day to this. There are some items, some places in antiquity that are still around, where you can even go and see them, and the Bible is explicit about where they are, but it's also explicit when God takes care of you and he's done something. If it's not to be revealed, it's not. So, I just thought it was interesting who could not enter, or who could or could not enter into the congregation. And so I'm going to give you just a little bit, and I'll be reading from Deuteronomy 23, starting at verse 1. He that is wounded in the stones, or hath his privy member cut off, shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. I believe, what is that, a eunuch? What would
I
they
was
be
going to ask
considered?
you to explain that.
The private parts.
Oh, it doesn't say that here.
What does your, because you have a different,
Mine says the very words.
oh, we don't hear yours. What does yours say?
Mine says, he who is emasculated by crushing or mutilation shall not enter the assembly of the Lord.
What does yours say, Miss Lava?
Mine says, if a man's testicles are crushed or his penis is cut off, he may not be included in the assembly of the Lord.
Wow.
And
Does
what does
yours
yours
say
say?
that?
No one who
okay.
has escalated or has his male organs cut off entered the assembly of God.
Wow.
Now, remember I said, wouldn't that be eunuchs?
Yeah.
You know what eunuchs
Yes.
are?
Yeah.
You know what the eunuchs were, Miss Lava? Eunuchs. The eunuchs. Do you know what they were?
No.
Eunuchs were males who were trusted to watch over the women of the harem.
Oh yeah.
And because he was a man with man parts, and they were women with women parts, they didn't want no hanky-panky, so they would cut their private parts off.
They cut everything off or just the...
They cut off the happy part.
Oh, wow. I thought they cut off the two things, you know.
The testicles?
Yeah. Because isn't that
They're all
also
connected.
Yeah.
It's all connected.
yeah.
However, it's clear because one of these says the penis and the testicles. So
Wow.
if you were missing either
Yeah.
part, you couldn't enter into the
Wow.
congregation. Isn't that something?
Yeah.
Now,
And they bleed to death, doesn't it?
well, no, there's ways to do it. And they were very, very smart. You would cut off the blood supply. So once you made the cut, you would stop it from bleeding out by putting a tourniquet or stopping it at this point. So you cut it off and then you tie it off and it'll stop bleeding. Yeah, it's a terrible thing to think about, but there was a reason for all of this, just like we talked about the women, purification.
Yeah.
And every time they had their monthly and every time they had a baby, they had to go through all of this. And I'm going to tell you what, they wouldn't have had to worry about me having but maybe one. Maybe one. Oh my God.
My great grandmother, that was considered circumcision on a woman.
Because in her tribe.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
yeah, and
Yeah.
they cut the
Yeah.
women's
They
female.
cut the-
Female-
They
Female
still do that.
circumcision.
The Muslims,
Yeah.
certain Muslims will do that to
That's
their
right.
9-year-old daughters.
Well, she
Yeah.
was
They
done.
don't-
She said it was
none or
done.
anything.
You know, they said it was done young.
They're
It's
doing it
wicked.
young.
They're still doing it. It
Yes,
hasn't
ma'am.
stopped.
They have tried to stop it.
Yeah.
Humanitarian groups have
Yeah.
gotten together over the years. However, they have their understandings and their beliefs. And what used to amaze me is that who are we to go into a tribe, a group, a community, an organization of people and say, you're not doing that right. Let me show you how it's supposed to be done.
No,
and
don't
they've been
do it.
doing it for hundreds
Yeah.
of years.
Yeah,
I don't agree with it, but who am I?
yeah.
No,
You know?
that's their belief.
That's their belief. Lots of beliefs. You find in the African community, you'll see the ones with the big
Yep.
thing in
Yeah.
their lip.
And the big ears.
Yes.
Where they've been, and that's beautiful to them.
Yeah.
A man in that tribe won't marry you if you got a regular lip, and they're stretching it
Yeah.
out until it,
This
and it's
big.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that's the way it was.
Yeah.
And who are we to say that's wrong? So, here we have these eunuchs. They couldn't go and be part of this congregation. I'm at number 2. A bastard shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Even to his 10th generation shall he not enter into the congregation of the Lord. So apparently, you could be born a bastard, meaning you didn't have the privilege of having a married mother and father. And then even until the 10th generation, you still were not considered acceptable. Because, you know, as the generations go on, certain things are either added or subtracted in your line, in your lineage. Even until the 10th generation. Again, God is explicit. He gives you instructions and he tells you what he expects. Now, number 3, an Ammonite or a Moabite shall not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Even to their 10th generation shall they not enter into the congregation of the Lord forever. Now, do you remember, Vicky, the Moabites and the Ammonites? You remember them? Are you able to share where the Moabites came from, what their belief system was? So we'll have some idea as to why they couldn't come in.
Off the top of my head, no.
Okay, so, oh wow.
Weren't they
Ammonite.
Lot? Didn't it start out with Lot's daughters?
That's right.
Yeah.
They were descendants of that, what we would consider incestuous relationship. They were already.
They started it, right?
That's
Yes,
right.
Yeah.
They started it. And to tell you the truth, I did tell you all, I had such a problem with it when we first started. I stayed on it for about, 2 weeks? Because I just couldn't believe it.
Yeah.
Because I have known God in some of my readings to have stopped some things from happening because he's God and he could do that. So that when, I think I told you the story about, oh gosh, the young man who, the Pharaoh's wife wanted Joseph.
Yes.
And
he was put in prison.
right. And all the blocks that went in to stop them from getting together, because she was the powerful one. Also, when Abraham and Sarah went into a new community, and he told her, don't you tell them you're my wife. You're going to tell them you're my sister. And then the king took a liking to her.
Right.
and he called her in. I think there was a movie done or a song done, One Night with the King. That's sort of kind of based on this story. He called her in because he wanted to lay with her.
Yeah.
But before that could happen, God came to him in a dream and said, don't you lay with that woman.
Right.
And he was going back and forth with God. Why can't I? You know, I'm the king. And he said, because she belongs to another.
Yeah.
Don't you lay. See, God has the understanding of what's going to happen down the road. And some things he interjected his sovereign will, and nothing could be done. But this Lot and his two daughters kind of thing, he did not. And I kept being stuck on that because I knew God, who is all powerful, could have stopped that. However, as we go and start reading, we see the Moabites and the Ammonites, they all had a part to play in creation, in the whole makeup of the world. So they had a place. They had a job to do.
Yeah.
And so they had to survive. And we found out that they are still remnants of those two tribes in what is in Africa, and I had given the name of the region. However, I don't have it in front of me, but we had talked about where we find traces of this tribe even today. And one of the things we knew that was disrespectful about them is that they believed in many gods, many gods. And they had one that they favored, and I had given that information when we were back. And if you are interested, I'll catch you ladies up, because I did give that when we had another group that Vicky was part of at the time. But it was pretty interesting to find out that these folks are still around. And of course, everybody has a job to do. So, number 4 says, because they met you not with bread and with water in the way when ye came forth out of Egypt, and because they hired against the Balaam was a demigod, Balaam, the son of Beor of Pethor of Mesopotamia, to curse thee. Number 5, nevertheless, the Lord thy God would not hearken unto Balaam, but the Lord thy God turned the curse into a blessing unto thee, because the Lord thy God loved thee. Isn't that beautiful? I didn't do something to you that I could have, because I love you. That's a beautiful thing. So I'm going to jump right over to number 9, where it talks about uncleanness to be avoided in the army. Now, again, we are this whole multitude of people, and there are laws and things that have to be followed. And here's another one. When the host goeth forth against thine enemies, that's when your army goes out to fight, then keep thee from every wicked thing. If there be among you any man that is not clean by reason of uncleanness, that chanceth him by night, then shall he go abroad out of the camp. He shall not come within the camp. But it shall be when evening cometh on, he shall wash himself with water, and when the sun is down, he shall come into the camp again. Thou shalt have a place also without the camp, whither thou shalt go forth abroad. And thou shalt have a paddle upon thy weapon, and it shall be, when thou wilt ease thyself abroad, thou shalt dig therewith, and shalt turn back, and cover that which cometh from thee. That's when you're using the potty. Dig,
Yes.
and then cover it. God thought about everything, and particularly what my grandmother used to tell me, cleanliness is next to godliness.
Yes.
And so you had to be clean.
Yeah.
For the Lord thy God walketh in the midst of thy camp to deliver thee, and to give up thine enemies before thee. Therefore shall thy camp be holy, that he see no unclean thing in thee, and turn away from thee. Isn't that amazing? He's walking amongst you. He's walking around. You want to cover your stuff and cover things so that God is not in filth. Now, there are other varied laws. When you look at chapter 24, it gives you laws about divorce. I believe we might want to hear about that.
Yeah.
Why don't we read a little bit of that, Miss
Okay.
Lala? That's 24.
Suppose a man
starting at
marries
1. Go
a
ahead.
woman, but later discovers something about her that is shameful. So he writes her a letter of divorce, gives it to her, and sends her away. If she then leaves and marries another man, and the second husband also divorces her or dies, the former husband may not marry her again, for she has defiled. She has been defiled. That would be detestable to the Lord. You must not bring guilt upon the land the Lord your God has given you as a special possession. A newly married man must not be drafted into the army or given any other special responsibilities. He must be free to be at home for 1 year, bringing happiness to his wife he has married. It is wrong to take a pair of millstones or even just the upper millstone as a pledge, for the owner uses it to make a living. If anyone kidnaps a fellow Israelite and treats him as a slave or sells him, the kidnapper must die. You must cleanse the evil from among you. Watch all contagious skin diseases carefully and follow the instructions of the Levitical priests. Obey the commands I have given them. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam as you were coming from Egypt. If you lend anything to your neighbor, do not enter your neighbor's house to claim the security.
Right.
Stand outside and the owner will bring it out to you. If your neighbor is poor and has only a cloak to give as security, do not keep the cloak overnight. Return the cloak to its owner by sunset, so your neighbor can sleep in it and bless you. And the Lord your God will count it as a righteous act.
All right. Isn't that something? Right down to recognizing that a young man who gets married, he needs to have time with his wife.
Yeah.
Don't take him into the army, because where's his mind going to be?
On the wife.
On the wife.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing how God knows the heart? Don't do something.
Oh, yes.
Don't bring a young person into the army thinking that they're going to be ready to rock and roll in your army, and he just got married. He's not. And God recognizes that. He knows that. Why doesn't man know that? I know when you look at some of the laws or some of the things that they have, and they call desertion. You take a young man who just got married, he's got a beautiful wife, but in order to take care of his family, he joins the army. He needs to make money. But you take him in and you deprive him and tell him he can't do this, he can't do that, he can't do this, he can't do that, knowing his heart is with his wife. But God knew that. Isn't that amazing?
Yeah.
So these are all the different laws, various laws here in Deuteronomy. There are laws about keeping family lines, laws about bringing the first fruit of the land before the Lord in thankfulness. That's in chapter 26. There is a prayer that gives prayer that he prays that when he gives his tithes in the 3rd year. Do you know what the tithe is? The tithe is the 1/10. The tithe, you know what the tithe is, Miss Lala? The tithe is 1/10 of your sustenance. If you have 10 cows, 1/10 of your sustenance is pledged to
Oh,
the
the
Lord.
tithe. I
The
didn't
tithe.
understand. I was hearing names, but they don't always work better in here.
The tithe.
Yeah, the tithe.
Miss Lala is a
Right.
Bible scholar as well. She went to school.
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, so I knew she knew. And so then here we are, that they have been given all these instructions, including the 10 Commandments that were written on the 2 tablets. They were sacred. Why were they sacred? Do you know why?
Because God wrote them.
Absolutely. Written by the hand of God. Sacred. And then we have also information about curses. God doesn't leave you to question what's going to happen. He tells you up front, and there were some curses that you could expect. If you did this thing, you would be cursed. And they have those listed also here in Deuteronomy. Right on up till we go into Deuteronomy 29. And in Deuteronomy 30, great mercies that are promised to the repentant. Let's hear a little bit about that. Can you read someone starting at Deuteronomy 30, starting at verse 1? Can you? All right.
So it shall be, when all of these things have come upon you, the blessing and the curse which I have set before you, and you can call them to mind, all the nations, and where the Lord your God has banished you.
Keep going.
Okay. And you return to the Lord your God, and obey him with all your heart and your soul, according to all that has commanded you today, and you or your sons. And then the Lord God will restore you from captivity and compassion on you, and then you gather you again for all the people who the Lord your God has scattered you.
Keep going.
You are outcasts at the ends of the earth, and from there the Lord your God will gather you, and from there you will be bringing back. The Lord your God will bring you into the land which your fathers possessed, and shall possess it. And you will prosper and multiply you more than your own fathers. Moreover, the Lord your God will circumcise your... Wait a minute. Circumcise, because it's half in your heart and the heart of your descendants, to the love of your Lord your God, all your hearts and with all your souls, that you may live. The Lord your God will inflict all these curses on your enemies and on those who hate you and persecute you. And you shall again obey the Lord your God and observe all these commandments which I command you today. Then your Lord your God will prosper, and you will abundantly in all the work of your hand, and in the offspring of your body, and the offspring of your cattle, and in the produce of your ground. For the Lord will again rejoice over you for good, and just as you rejoice over your fathers. If you obey the Lord your God, keep his commandments and his statutes which are written in the book of the Lord, and you turn the Lord your God with all your heart and soul.
Right there, we're going to stop. I'm going to read that again. If thou shalt hearken unto the voice of the Lord thy God, to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the law, and if thou turn unto the Lord thy God with all thy heart and with all thy soul, everything that you are, if you turn it over to God, He will prosper
Are
you.
you okay?
He will prosper you, and he will cause you to be fruitful and multiply. It's a promise.
Excuse me.
That's all right. It's a promise that God has given.
I'm allergic to the pop.
That's all right.
Excuse me.
Take your
Pollen
time.
season.
I know.
Tell me
Would
about it.
anybody like a mint?
No, thank you.
No, thank you, though.
No, thank you.
Appreciate
We're
it.
good, thank you.
Now, God has given them all this information and everything. And remember, he's already told them that a lot of them are going to die out. I have the numbers. Maybe next week when I come back, I can give you the exact number of those who did not make it into the promised land. It was an age group. I think it was something between 20 and
40 or 50?
yeah, somewhere along in there, and those were the ones who would go in and who would not. Now, he had to give them a new leader, and Joshua was going to be the new leader. However, we also found out, I think last week we went and jumped ahead a little bit because Joshua is the next book. And we found out that Joshua did succeed Moses. But Joshua had some issues, and we'll talk about them. But I'm going to give you right now, in Deuteronomy 31, Moses told the people these words. In 31, I'm starting at 2. And he said unto them, I am 120 years old this day. I can no more go out and come in. Also, the Lord hath said unto me, Thou shalt not go over this Jordan. The Lord thy God, he will go over before thee, and he will destroy these nations from before thee, and thou shalt possess them. And Joshua, he shall go over before thee, as the Lord has said. And the Lord shall do unto them as he did to Sihon, and to Og, kings of the Amorites, and unto the land of them whom he destroyed. And the Lord shall give them up before your face, that ye may do unto them according unto all the commandments which I have commanded you. 6. Be strong and of a good courage. Fear not, nor be afraid of them. For the Lord thy God, he it is that doth go with thee. He will not fail thee, nor forsake thee. And Moses called unto Joshua, and said unto him in the sight of all Israel, Be strong and of a good courage, for thou must go with this people into the land which the Lord hath sworn unto their fathers to give them. And thou shalt cause them to inherit it. And the Lord, he it is that doth go before thee. He will be with thee. He will not fail thee, neither forsake thee. Fear not, neither be dismayed. Moses is encouraging Joshua. It's a big job.
Yeah.
When you look out and everything in front of you is covered with people from cover to cover, whew, that's a lot.
Yeah.
But Moses was encouraging Joshua because God had already prepared it. He knew it. He knew what was going to happen before it even happened. And so Moses was encouraging Joshua to be strong and of good courage because God is with you and he will not fail you. If you don't remember anything else, Joshua, remember this. God will not fail you. The scriptures tell us he will be with us even until the end of time. Even until the end of time. So, we are going to be done with Deuteronomy. in 34, Deuteronomy 34, you will see that Moses goes up to Mount Nebo, and that's where he was able to look over and see the promised land. But he would not be able to enter in. So after he sees it, he's already encouraged Joshua, and it's not long after that he dies in the land of Moab, and God buries him there. But we don't know where. But God buried him. And Joshua was next in line. He succeeded Moses. He was the son of Nun. And the scriptures tell us Joshua was full of the spirit of wisdom. For Moses had laid his hands upon him, and the children of Israel hearkened unto him. They listened, and he did as the Lord commanded Moses. And there arose not a prophet since in Israel like Moses. Moses was God's man. I don't think I ever saw any more, and I know the scripture's telling us, where God spoke to a man face to face. I mean, just imagine that you were such a person, such good character, that God chose to speak to you face to face, to give you instruction, to trust you. That's a big deal. That's
And to give him the 10 Commandments.
Yes, to give him the 10. They said when he went up one way. And when he came down, his whole countenance, his face, everything had changed. You're in the presence of God. And you don't have to open your mouth. People can see that you were in the presence of God. He left his mark on you. I believe even now, when you're in the presence of God, when you've had prayer, or when you've tucked yourself away in your prayer closet or your secret place, I believe that when you come out, people know you've been in the presence of God. Something changes about your whole countenance. You're changed. You can't be the same way you were. That's a beautiful thing. A beautiful thing. So we're going to talk a little bit more about what we found. Our hearts were given as it related to Deuteronomy, and maybe ask some more questions, or because I'm not going to take us into Joshua today. We'll start fresh with it when we come back. So we have covered Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy, which are, 5 books. So let's talk a little bit.
I have a question.
Yes.
In Deuteronomy, it says, a man shall not take his father's wife, nor uncover his father's bed. I understand the first part, but what does the second part mean?
You shouldn't see your father naked.
Oh, okay.
And that was the sin with Lot's daughters.
Yes.
They knew that. You should not see your
Right.
parents in their nakedness. And those 2 girls did. And that's what that means.
Okay, thank you.
In a lot of antiquity, there wasn't a lot of places to be private.
Right.
So there were rules. And part of that helped to give you some privacy. Again, an all-knowing God. He thought of everything. Now, you've got a tent. You got a little space here for your animals. Well, maybe not animals. You got a little space here to keep your food. A little space here to keep the children. A little space there that you might keep the clothing. A little space over here for your books and your stuff. And a little space over here for you to sleep, to lay down. And if you are a married man or woman, this is where you laid with your spouse. And when it was time to have relations with your spouse, we're all in the same little thing here. However, there are rules. So nobody's going to come and pull the curtain back or pull the cover back. You're not going to do that because it's forbidden.
Right.
You should not look at your parents' nakedness. So, again, we've done 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. What do you think so far? Are these people on a good path? Are they making their way into a good relationship with God? We're going to be going into Joshua and going forward. There's going to be some fighting going on and some battles going on. They don't know this, but they've got a hard road to still cover. And you have to be governed by laws. You have to be governed. There has to be order, because without order, you have chaos. So, we've got all these great people. I think even when we first started, I went through the lineage, starting at the beginning and working our way all the way down to Jesus, so we could see the different types of people that were in his line: murderers, harlots, deceitful people, And then you get to Jesus. It takes all kinds of people. We cannot choose who our relatives are.
Right.
Right.
But when we look even at Jesus' lineage, with him being the Savior, the Messiah, there were some people up in there that, boy, oh boy, because God is God, we knew Jesus was going to make it, but boy, oh boy, if it was left up to man with all that foolishness going on, would Jesus have even made it? Maybe not. Murderers and liars and cheats and all kinds of things went on down in that line. But that's what it was supposed to be. So even when these people were coming out of Exodus, when they were making that journey, and they were mumbling and complaining, and God continued to do miracles and show them signs and wonder, these people still complained.
Right.
Lala, we talked about how many times those people asked for water and meat. Lots of times. But think about it. When you were in Egypt, you couldn't eat when you wanted to. Water and things were not plentiful for you. You were a slave.
Yeah.
But now you want to complain. And God gave them what they asked for every time. Even when they first got a king, the people asked for a king. I don't think God had any intention of it being a normal order of things, but they asked for a king. And they got some great kings throughout antiquity. There were some wonderful kings. The one that comes to mind most is King who? Everybody
David.
knows him. King David.
Yeah.
But the one that I think about is Solomon.
Yes.
And look at how many wives and
Yeah.
concubines and all. But he was still a man after God's own heart. And he was still blessed. And David and Uriah and Bathsheba. Right? Is that her name?
Yeah,
Help me.
Bathsheba.
Yeah.
Who
She's
was
the one that
woman?
slept with David and had a baby, and David killed the husband. Yeah.
Uzziah. Maybe his name was Uzziah.
Uriah to the front line.
Sent him to the
Yes.
front. There
Yeah.
you go. Look at that.
So that made him a murderer.
Yes.
It made him a murderer. But God still
God
found
still
favor with him.
David.
Even with him being a murderer, he found favor with him.
So even though we're sinners, God still uses us.
Absolutely. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah.
Yes,
That's
it is.
mercy and grace. because we can't help ourselves. This flesh wants to do what it wants to do. We are constantly having to beat this flesh down. And it's not easy. It's like I think about dieting, trying to diet.
That's never ending.
Ooh, it's
a
never
battle.
ending. It's a battle.
We're
And
not
so it is with the flesh.
Yeah.
It's always a battle. And you will win because God has already given you the victory. However, it's a constant battle. Every day you're fighting that flesh. You know, I'm not supposed to do that. Now, why are you trying to entice me to do that? Go away. I've read in some instances where it says, Satan, get behind me, because you know, I know you, I see you. It's you.
I have a question. So, Joshua is a son of who?
Nun, N-U-N.
N-U-N, okay.
So
And you can check
he
the
was
line-
probably
the
really
lineage.
young then, right, Joshua?
He had to be. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had to be young, but I don't think he would, I mean, he wasn't that young that he couldn't handle this, you know, because look at David. When David went up before Goliath,
He was
David was a
good.
teenager.
Yes.
Yeah.
A teenager
Yeah.
with a slingshot and 3 smooth stones. I'll never forget that story
Yeah.
because they told us that the stones were smooth. I think about river rocks.
Yeah.
I like them.
Yeah.
I like the way they feel. But I think about that. He was a teenager.
Yeah.
Despise not my youth. God can use anything
Yes.
and anybody that he chooses. Goliath was over 7 feet tall. 7 feet.
Wow.
Man.
And that's why I said I believe he was a leftover, a byproduct of the relationship between a celestial being and a human female. Because they were saying how pretty the human women were.
Yeah. I heard that Goliath had brothers with him when he was challenging
Really?
David, and he had the other stones. I
Ah,
don't know if it's true, but that's what I heard.
wow.
Yeah.
That's something for us to look up
Yeah.
and find out.
Yeah.
So Goliath had
I think they were
other
at the
people
camp,
there.
you know, with him at that time.
Right, because they had camped.
Yeah.
That's something to check out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down.
Well, I am really sorry that I didn't get to start your Bible study at the beginning, you know.
Oh, I'm sorry, but you know, I believe in doing a recap so that we can all end up on the same page. The idea is that we run through the whole Bible, one chapter at a time,
Yes.
stopping and examining characters who did good and even characters who did not so good. But that, I believe, is a good way for us to connect ourselves to the Bible so that it becomes interesting.
Yes.
There's great stories, love stories, and murder,
Yeah.
and the first murder, the first incest, the first banquet, the first celebration. All of it's in the Bible. And as I was teaching my children when they were coming up, and I talked to my daughter the other night, and I asked her, I said, do you remember the story? She said, oh yeah, Mom. What story do you want me? I don't want you to tell me, but you do remember. I said, so therefore, I'm expecting that you give that information to your children,
Yeah.
and they'll give it to their children. Because if I can explain it to you, sitting down trying to read all these letters and putting it together, most people are not going to do it. However, if you have a conversation with me and we sit down and we talk, I believe we know. Science has proven it, and we know. You'll remember it a lot more than you would if you read it yourself.
Amen.
Amen. So we have learned about some folks so far in the Bible. We talked about Lot and his 2 daughters, and we talked about Abraham, who's the father of nations. We talked about Miriam and not Joshua yet, but Aaron and Pharaoh. And you know, Pharaoh was a title. When it said Pharaoh, that was the king at the time, but it was a title. And so therefore they just kept saying Pharaoh because it's a title and not a particular Pharaoh at that point, because it was a title. So Moses telling Pharaoh that God said, let my people go. He's telling this to Pharaoh, who of course, the scriptures tell me that God hardened his heart. And for a reason. Because I said, we looked at what the plagues were, and I think the second plague was where it turned it into blood. And I told you all that we wouldn't have got to plague number 3 through 10. Because once you turn everything,
Yeah.
including things that were already capped up and put away, everything that was water turned to blood. That would have been enough for me.
Yeah.
But because God had a point and a purpose, he hardened his heart. And he hardened his heart right down until out of his own mouth that last plague was done, and he lost his own son. He spoke that out of his own mouth. You know, sometimes we can do that. We can just talk all kinds of craziness on to yourself because we're not satisfied. And again, it's the flesh. It's the flesh that we're fighting, and it's never satisfied. There is a scripture that tells us how the flesh is never satisfied. And so therefore it continues to push you. I want this. I want that. I need this. You need to get this for me. And those are the things that get us into trouble. Because we should not want anything. I think about the Garden of Eden. Those folks had everything they needed.
That's the truth.
How in the world could you mess this up? But she did. And I have to say, it was Eve. But when Adam tried to say, that woman that you gave, that doesn't work, that doesn't work. We all have our own minds, and our relationship with God is an individual thing. We weren't born with anybody. Even twins are not born hooked on to each other, although Esau and his brother, he was hanging on to his foot. But typically, we enter this world alone. We will leave this world alone. And we're responsible for the mistakes and the things that we do in our life. We can't look over there and point at you and say, you made me do that. What was that? Flip Wilson or one of them comedians said, the devil made me do it. Okay. But you can't say, well, Lala made me do that. That's why. Nah, that doesn't fly. Doesn't fly. So, ladies, unless we have more questions or we have something else we want to talk about, like I said, I don't want to go into Joshua and we get started and we can't really get a good grip on it. We have finished out Deuteronomy. I think it was very helpful that we recognize that Joshua is now in charge. Moses died in the land of Moab, and his job was done. He did what he was supposed to do. And now moving forward, we're going to be under the guidance and the tutelage of Joshua. Maybe next week what we'll do is we'll talk about Joshua's character. Let's find out who he was. What kind of a man was Joshua? It always intrigued me to get behind biblical characters to see what were their strengths, what were their weaknesses. Do I have any of those characteristics? Can I obtain any of those characteristics? I often wonder just what it took to be live in that time, and how you had to carry yourself in order to live in that time. It wasn't easy, you know. They didn't have any corner stores or vending machines or cars, all these things that we take for granted. But they lived, and they lived rather well. If your husband or your dad had 5 cows and 10 chickens, and you were doing pretty good.
Yeah.
You were doing pretty good.
I have a question. Do we have time for another
Oh,
question?
we have plenty of time.
Why was it, if a woman committed adultery, they would stone her?
Stone her to death.
They never talk about what they do to the man. Why was it always the woman? You know.
Now, I'm going to tell you I'm not sure, but I'll come back.
Okay.
But let me tell you off the top of my head, man was created first.
Right.
And he was created in God's own image. It tells us that. And God was rather pleased with man. Woman was an addition because man has needs. And woman was put there to satisfy those needs. However, you have a responsibility to that husband, to that one. And there was no room. Again, laws were in place to keep things from being chaotic. Laws were in place so that one woman is your woman. Nobody's supposed to covet her, touch her, look at her. Now, they go a little far. When you look at Muslims, their wives are all covered except for their eyes.
Yes.
That's the only thing, and their hands.
Yep.
That's the only thing another man or anybody who's not your husband should be able to see of your body. Nowadays, I think it's a little hard to maintain that. However, I see them in the grocery stores.
Yeah.
I see them all the time, and I'm sweating, and I got a fan. And again, it must be a mindset because they are not sweating. They don't look sweaty. I've
Yeah.
never seen, how you
Yeah.
can see under their armpits or something.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at them pretty hard.
Yeah.
But there is just the idea that this person was set aside for you. And if this person cheats on you
Yeah.
and goes outside of then she should be punished, and punished severely.
Yeah.
I don't agree with death. However, after somebody has cheated on you and you punish them, say they have to sit outside the camp for a month or a year or whatever, and you bring them back, will you feel the same?
No.
No.
But
You
why
won't?
didn't they punish the men? Because
You mean the man that she slept with?
Yeah.
I'm not sure why they wouldn't do that. However, we're going to get into that because there is a story of there's a story of one of the patriarchs and his sons. I think it has something to do with Joseph and all of them. And he laid with a harlot. And because the act itself did not betroth you, but the act itself, once it was done, I need something to say I'm protected. And he left his signet ring and his staff. And later on in the story, when we get into it, and I'll pull it up early so we can talk about it, that signet ring and staff identified who this person was.
Right.
And when she, the harlot, kept saying, well, I slept with this guy and he promised me and he said he was, and she brought out the signet ring and the staff, and that was a patriarch who was very important in the community And I guess if you were able to punish also the man as well as the woman, some of those important patriarchs would have bit the dust. They'd have been dead. Now, I'm assuming that all comes into play. And that's a good thing to check, because we know that the man was held in high esteem. He could do no wrong. And these poor women, if you didn't have a husband, number one, you were looked at like you were a piece of crap.
Yes.
You were a nobody. And if you couldn't have children,
Oh, that was worse.
you were really ostracized
That's
and
right.
treated badly.
Yes.
Because primarily, that's all you had to do.
Yeah.
Get a husband and make babies.
Yeah.
You didn't work outside the home. You weren't known for making the best soup in the
Yeah.
camp. You had no identity
Yeah.
outside of you were John's wife.
Yeah.
That was way before women's rights.
Way before.
Very good.
Can you imagine though, Miss Lola? I'm telling you, I'd have been dead a long time.
Yeah.
They'd have dug me up and killed me again. Because they'd have said, she's just terrible. I know I couldn't have, because they had to toe the line.
Yeah.
You had to walk the line, a very fine line, you know, and men could get away with
Yes.
some things.
Yes.
Not ideal, but it was the way it was. And even today, when we read about these patriarchs, these great men, they all had their flaws and didn't always receive what we would conceive reading it now, sitting on the outside looking in. Yeah, you should have had your fingers smacked. Something should have happened to you for doing that. But it didn't work out like that. And even women, when they were recognized, only one or two of them, like the judge, Deborah.
Yeah.
She was a judge. Most of them, you didn't know what their names were, but if they did something that was spectacular or off the chain, you got a name. Even the harlot that ran the stake through the
Yeah.
she has a name, and her name is in the Bible for,
Yeah.
you know, eternity. So what she did mattered, particularly when you get your name listed, because even Noah, I don't think we even knew what Noah's wife's name was. I don't think it was even mentioned. Now, what about, they did mention Lot's wife. How about that?
Yeah.
Was her name Rachel? Wait a minute.
I don't remember her name.
But they mentioned her
Yeah.
name. And I think it was because when she turned into that pillar of
disobeyed.
salt,
Yeah.
though that statue or that marker can still be found, according to scholars.
Yeah.
So women, when you did get your name mentioned, it was a big deal.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, you were just a woman, you know, there to further humanity by conceiving and carrying these offspring and calling it a day. Elizabeth and Jesus' mother, Mary, blessed women of God, and they were named.
Yes.
And quite a few Marys.
Yeah.
Quite a few. Mary was a common name.
Yeah.
But Jesus wasn't a common name. You don't find anybody
No.
else. Not in antiquity. Later on, people are calling them, but not in antiquity. Nobody else was named Jesus. And I told you, there was a lot of them. When you got a Job or a Jonathan, a Peter, hundreds of them.
Yeah.
But there was only one Jesus. That's amazing. Makes me excited. So I'll be checking about, I'm going to check out, what was it we were getting? Goliath
Yeah. The brothers.
brothers who were there at the time.
Yeah, that's what I heard. Because I watch a lot of Bible study on YouTube. Yeah.
I've been watching some different things too. As you know, I have a channel called What Nobody Told Me After 65. And you know, I couldn't, Vicky, use those labels that I was going to put on there. The labels wouldn't come up. But anyway, I'm happy to give you this so that if you'd like to go to YouTube and pull me up, I'd love it. And then, of course, my phone number is on there.
What's your, this channel here?
This is Bible Trek, Trek. Bible Trek.
Is that on YouTube too? Okay.
Bible Trek. I'm gonna figure out how to use these labels. They just didn't act right. They're perfect. There's nothing wrong with them. You bought the right ones.
Right.
Just it seems my software either wasn't updated so that I could get it or not. Yeah. So anyway, I've enjoyed you all. We had a wonderful time.
This was great.
I am
Thank
cutting
you
us
so much.